something that's been floating around my mind lately is, given the vast range of graphics games offer, it's entirely possible that platforms like the PS4 simply never go away. Nothing would stop a lightweight indie game, especially a 2D one, from running on it in 10 years or so. If the Steam Deck is the bar for current gen, in theory, last gen ports should always be possible, at least for this generation, no? Well, actually, I'm going to go to you, Oliver, on this one, because still in development is your Too Big for Steam Deck 2025 update.
Yes.
I think he's kind of right in the sense that, there are always going to be lightweight games that can run on older GPUs. There's nothing new in that, right? But there are definitely new games that don't run particularly well on the Steam Deck. And in terms of this PlayStation 4 comment, I think it's simply the case that people just have moved on from the PlayStation 4 to the PS5 or whatever, so there's no business case for making those games.
I think people have moved on, and I think ultimately, like, the age of the hardware is just a concern, whether that's a failure concern or whether that's just people throwing out that hardware. Obviously, if you have a PS5, there's very little reason to have a PS4, right? And as far as I understand it, most PS4 players aren't buying like the hottest new indie titles. They're playing Fortnite, they're watching Netflix, they're playing Warzone, they're doing these kinds of tasks. They tend to not be as invested in gaming as perhaps people who have newer console hardware and newer PC hardware. And also at some point, who knows when this will happen, but Sony may just flat out stop you from shipping games on PS4 on that storefront. Right now on the PS3 and Vita storefronts, you can access games, you can download them, you can buy them, but no developer publisher has been able to add new games to those storefronts in years. I think like 5 or 6 years, quite a long time now. There's also some issues on the technical side, like newer versions of common commodity engines may drop support for these older systems. Certainly rendering systems in Unreal Engine 5, different systems are not supported on that class of hardware for more advanced games. And I'd also say that, like, even if you're dealing with really simple games, you have a lot of overhead in the PS5 and similar systems that can be useful, especially on the CPU side. Like, it lets you operate, I'd imagine, at higher levels of abstraction, worry about optimization less for your simpler games. And you can do things probably, I mean, I'd presume, although it's not a great practice, but like shipping blueprints and games like that. Maybe there are some things you couldn't get away with on a PS4. You could get away with them on PS5. That ultimately is like conducive to having a healthier maybe development environment, to being able to ship games in a faster at a faster pace, with hopefully with somewhat fewer people, things like this. And that's what having access to hardware that is much more powerful than your game might really need, that's what it's giving you. So I think there are some advantages to just sticking with the newer hardware there for sure.
Alex?
Also one less headache, right? Another platform to support. I don't know. I feel like they already have to support enough if you're an indie dev, including things like Switch. If you're going to be focusing on low power anyway, I think I'd rather hit that really broad audience rather than the probably more dwindling over time PS4 audience. So I think Oliver put that all together really well.
Yeah, essentially, there are some interesting examples. For example, the developers of No Man's Sky are actually still supporting the Xbox One X in a meaningful way by adding graphics features that are running on the new consoles, selected ones, but they're porting them over to the One X because it can do it. But the question is whether there's an audience for that, and the answer is probably not. And if you're talking about a sort of forever platform, then we're basically talking about the PC at that point. Where absolutely there's going to be indie games that will run on a 1060. Even the Tiny Glade was it ran pretty well on the 1060. Yeah. So that's my thought on that one. But yeah, and I think as we move into this sort of more PC-like era, certainly with Xbox seemingly embracing it, then cross-gen as a concept could just kind of like last for longer and longer and longer. But it's all going to come down to the games, right? Similar to what's happened on Steam Deck, where there are games that just don't really run well on it anymore.